wasn't looking too good. We fixed it up, leaving it the way it was, but fixed up. It's in tippy-top shape. You know, I always used to say, it's got to be tippy-top. But you had a lot of other presidents that weren't into that. I am. I've always been into it. It wasn't looking too good. We fixed it up, leaving it the way it was, but fixed up. It's in tippy-top shape. You know, I always used to say, it's got to be tippy-top. But you had a lot of other presidents that weren't into that. I am. I've always been into it. The Oval wasn't.
Thought that was pretty funny. How's it going out there, my fellow world patriots? It is indeed Sunday, December 7th, 2025, and oh, how the time is a-flying. And I don't know if that was the third or the fourth time President Trump gave us the little tippy-top thing there, but I thought it was pretty funny because he says, yeah, you know, a lot of presidents weren't into that, but I've always been into that tippy-top, you know, keeping things in tippy-top shape. So that was over at the Kennedy Center, and as you guys are aware by the title, I have a special guest, and he's doing a thing. He's doing something over here off the screen, and when we get him back in a second, we will get a little conversation going. But I'm going to show you guys some pictures and stuff until we get there. Here was last night, I believe it was last night there, where they had, oh God, cookies. We had stars of the 80s. I don't know who this gentleman on the far left is. I do know that's Sylvester Stallone. You got the two guys, was that Paul Stanley, I believe his name is. And, oh geez, the bad guy there from the Tom Selleck movies back in the 80s. But Gene Simmons, from Kiss, of course. And I don't know who these two guys are. But I know who this dude is. And that's President Trump. And yes, they were doing a little tippy-top action over there. And had a little fun, of course. And I thought that was pretty interesting. We got Ronnie Reagan over in the corner. And so while we have our favorite friend, it looks like he's getting some coffee. I'm keeping that off screen for now just so we're not doxing any locations or anything. But it looks like Juan's grabbing some coffee at the moment. He's I think it's like 8 in the morning where he is, so I appreciate him jumping on so early, which he's probably been up for a few hours anyway. But you guys have seen, let me see, is this what I wanted to show you? I'm going to play a little of this. Hopefully it doesn't, this is 6 minutes, but I'm going to only play in like literally 30 seconds, maybe a minute of this. But this is not seeming to go away for Waltz and these guys.
It's gotten so bad with the roiling scandals going on in Minnesota that he has either turned a blind eye to or for some reason has turned a blind eye to, that even some of his allies are saying that his political career is over. Former Minnesota State Senator and political analyst in Minnesota. This is, who is this? Ember Reichgott Jung, saying he is clearly vulnerable and, in my view, is riskier than any Democratic candidate that might run. Anonymous longtime ally of Waltz's in Minnesota.
I mean, I don't know how you can look at Tim Waltz and not see a complete train wreck, and I don't know what they were thinking about bringing him in there with Kamala, because it didn't make sense to me at all. You know, they make the puppet, you know, what's that puppet channel? They make fun of it, like, oh, how come we couldn't get the Jew back? You know, meaning like Josh Shapiro. Right, he would have been probably much more palatable for people to listen to rather than this guy with his jazz hands everywhere and just being a complete nut job everywhere. But the fraud that's coming out of Minnesota is not looking good for them, and it's not going away. And it seems like it's getting worse by the day. And so I covered this a little bit the other day, and let me see. So this is my question too, which is, so we know about this type of, you know, what Eric Daughtry here is calling a generational betrayal, right, of people that live in the United States, essentially taxpayers. That government was giving mortgages to illegal aliens harming American citizens. So not only were they basically not helping the citizens of the United States, but they were pooling all this money. And then my question to this is, you have people like BlackRock and Vanguard that were out there buying up land, buying up properties left and right, and essentially, out there to rent, not to sell. So were they out there renting to these illegals and they were kind of double dipping in a sense? Either way you cut it, it's not looking good for the other side, especially lately in the last couple of weeks, because a lot of things are being exposed, and I'm liking this pipe bomber. But what Juan came to talk about, I think his focus today is going to be about is getting more information out about Tina Peters. And I know President Trump has reposted something about her last week, late last week. So I believe he's aware of it, or at least the people on his media team are. But they need to do something to get her out of there, whether they, classify her as whistleblower status or whatever they have to do to get her out of that state prison in Colorado, because, we understand the issues in a state versus federal situation. So let me say hi to the chat. I always get busted on that. I don't say hi to you guys enough in the chat. Ish, sure, Jan. Miss A. Watley. That's the first thing I saw was your Brady Bunch commercial, your Brady Bunch comment. Oh yeah, Ilhan's not looking good today, guys. I have a little clip of her as well. She's not scared. She's not the 7-year-old little girl who left the war-torn area. She's adult. She can live wherever she wants now. Oh goodness, let's see which one here. This one. Let me make sure I have a good one for you. Her net worth is $30 million. This is Fox News reporting this anyways, but she's not she's not cowering, she's not gonna fall down. Yeah, this is an old one, and here's the thing too. Me and Hulk talk about this, numerous times, which is, wait, we reported on this X amount of years ago, and we're not the only ones that are doing this, right? We've been screaming about this stuff, and when this stuff came out in 2020, I believe it was, we were also complaining about this. But here it is. This is footage, and if you see the very grainy footage, because it's 5 whole years old, and I'm pretty sure they had 720 and 1080p back then, but it says, I don't know why these people are posting this stuff as new, but just dropped the undercover video of a Somali operative bragging about massive ballot harvesting for Ilhan Omar in Minneapolis. Liban Mohammed literally admits on camera he had hundreds of absentee ballots sitting in his car, blank, waiting to be filled out by Ilhan Omar's people. Who's filling out the absentee ballots? People who work with Omar. They came to our apartments. This isn't community organizing. This is straight up election fraud. Yep, absolutely. You knew I was a snake when you let me in. That's a pretty cool picture. Let's see. Okay, now I will finally get to the chat and say hello. Ding, ding, ding. We head over to the Foxhole, my home away from home. Phil.net, aka the Foxhole. How you guys doing over there? Hope you guys are having a great Sunday so far. Timmy needs to change his tampon. Yeah, yeah, I agree with that one for sure. What's up, Matrix Codebreaker? What's up, brother? Dropped a can over on the Foxhole. Says boom time, 107 time. Let's go. Much love, Space Shot. Much love. Right back at you, Matrix Codebreaker. And thank you to Q Shook Me All Night Long for a can. Says, where we go one, we go all. God bless. And I agree. Nice little Sunday here on the northeast Rhode Island. And I'll tell you guys, it was absolutely frozy a couple days ago. We had a low of 13 on one day, and the next day, and then not making this up, it was 17 for a low one day, and then 13 for a low the next day. And I'm like, ugh. Does a super cold, run up to the winter equal a mild winter, or does it equal a cold winter? I was talking to my father over on the 17th actually, and I said to him, man, it's freezing. I think it's going to be a cold winter. He says, well, I think typically when it's cold really early, that equals a mild winter. So I don't know if anybody out there has a memory about that stuff, whether it's if it makes it a mild winter, if it makes it a cold winter, or if it has no bearing on it. I don't know. But All I do know is it was absolutely frozen to the point where I have a pretty close to brand new battery in my car, and when you turn the key, it's like goes right on. It wasn't dead, but it wasn't quite as fast as it was. It was kind of like chit 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 chit. So that cold weather will definitely put a little hit on the cranking power of your vehicle for sure. And we are up to a balmy 40 degrees here today, so not over as nice as what I assume the weather would be to where Mr. Juanito is today, which is we don't want to dox his location. I'll let him dox himself when he's out there, but I'm thinking he's got to be in at least the 70s, like probably the 80s though. Hopefully he's not in the 90s because that would suck. Let me see. I'll tell you if I can tell you roughly. Oh wow. If he's where I think he is, that's weird. I'm getting varying degrees for locations. If Juan's in one place of that area, he could be as low as 48 degrees, and if he's in a different area, it could be as high as 80. So I'm not sure. What's up, brother? I see you unmuted.
Hey, yeah, I realized I had the mute on.
he's cruising down the road here. He's probably talking to me. And he's like, "Hey, what's up?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just doing the weather over here."
No, I was sitting here going, finally you mentioned something or other, and it clicked me on, oh, mute.
Yeah, dude, it's I was checking
up at the telescopes here.
Yes,
you go up there, and if you're up there at night, it can get down, 20 degrees, 15 degrees. I think I was up there one time years and years ago, and it started snowing. And by morning, just before the sun came up, we recorded 4 degrees. So
Ooh.
it can get pretty chilly up there. But, I actually, this time of the year, I think about Washington's crossing the Delaware and how cold it was then. And literally there's chunks of ice coming down the river, and they're going across these little flat Durham boats trying to get through. And there was 2 other generals trying to get forces across at the same time, and they couldn't get across the river because the ice flow was that great. So it was a miracle that he got across. And then they did that crossing stealthily on Christmas Day morning. And then they went through a snowstorm, kind of a blizzard, when you get the wind blowing a bit and you got snow on the ground, light snow. If it's really light snow, it blows. And so you can even see a little bit of sun above you, but that snow blowing, it just whites everything out. And the miracle of that was that the garrison that they were trying to close on, which was run by German mercenaries, they never saw a thing. In fact, they were all hunkered down because who goes to fight a war on Christmas? And then on top of that, you couldn't see anything. It was uncomfortable. And so Washington was able to come up on them, and in complete surprise on December 26th, started firing right down Main Street where these guys were at. The guys were running out of the, sleeping areas and restrooms, in their underwear. And so Washington not only caught them by surprise, but when they were done, they got all the nice warm German uniforms. So their army could be closed again, because they were closed for summer fighting, and they had been able to get better clothes for the winter fighting. So besides getting all the everything else, you got that nice warm German wool. So, but actually, I will tell you, one of the things that was on my mind, as relates to Tina Peters, even this time of year. One of the things, you talk about cold, the prison where she's at, for whatever reason they want to justify, someone's getting a piece of whatever, the money coming in. These prisons are run privately, a lot of them. And so in the main areas, they run the temperature very cold, and then the heat coming out of the main areas into the cells doesn't work very good. And so in the cell where Tina's at one point, one of the people that came to visit her, the temperature in the room was only, I think it was 53 degrees, and that's why after the door had been open minutes to the outside, letting it warm up. And Tina was saying it was in the mid 40s, pretty consistent. And even right now, you know, Tina's not feeling very well. She's been having an ongoing coughing problem and getting deeper. And the problem is she's a lung cancer survivor. She was a stewardess for a lot of years back in the days when, you know, you could still smoke in airplanes. And she's no spring chicken. She's 70 years old now, so this is quite a long time ago. And somewhere in here, she came up with lung cancer. And so they couldn't diagnose it at first. She just knew something was wrong, and she had this cough. They didn't see anything. And finally, they were able to get the right kind of a scan and saw, oh, shoot, you got cancer in your lung. So they removed a third of her right lung. And here she is, she was in remission, and here she is in prison. Well, they keep the place so cold that she's just, for most people who wouldn't have a clue, but anybody who's had somebody in prison or even been in prison themselves for some reason knows, they don't give you the blanket they give you is like a paper towel, so thin. And so it really isn't warm. And they don't keep the prison very warm. So she's been just shivering and freezing for weeks and weeks. And when we complained a little bit, they cranked the cell temperature up to like 85 degrees, which is at the high end of what's allowed. They're supposed to be somewhere between 65 and 85 degrees. Well, they got it in there. It's just ice cold. And we had this document, by the way, from someone who went into the thermostat and found it was very cold. And so she's just been miserable in jail there from the cold. And but even there, we're talking about temperatures that when Washington's people were crossing the Delaware, below freezing, well below freezing. They had still summer clothes for the most part. At the battles in Europe during World War I and II, cold was also a big factor. And the worst of the cold, by many accounts, happened at the Battle of the Bulge. And a lot of people here in the audience may, remember it from scenes from Patton, which kind of documented it so well, looking into the stuff that they were doing. And
I think we're starting to lose you a little bit, Juan.
Yeah, you'll have me momentarily here. It'll be a little better. I'm gonna go up to a spot that I actually enjoy here where I can see the town. And it'll be about 2 minutes before I get there. I apologize.
Oh, no, you go overlooking the cemetery, right?
Okay. Yeah. And so the guys on the bikes here, it looks like they're really going fast, but when you're on this twisty of a road, it's a little bit tough. But anyway, I was thinking about Tina. I was thinking about kind of comparisons, in my mind, at least the way I think, with other battles that may be better visuals for people. And of course, Patton there at the Battle of the Bulge. A little bit of the backstory, though, that, most people probably wouldn't understand to kind of frame the battle. German forces were in full retreat, both on the Russian front to the east and the Western front into Europe. And the Allies on the European side, Britain, US, Canada, and other forces, had been steadily pushing the German army across France and back into Germany. And to the north, you had Belgium. And so after Normandy, as the fight continued, they opened up ports at Antwerp the port facility at Antwerp, more supply of ammunition, personnel, equipment, tanks, half tracks, all sorts of things, were able to get into the fight. And as they came, the landing happened in June of 44. A lot of people wanted the landing to happen in 43 because there was a lot of equipment and men there in England at that point in time, but they held and didn't begin the landing till the following summer, June 6th of 44, because while they had people there, Dunkirk was still fresh in everybody's mind. And if they tried to mount an attack in Europe without enough men and without good supply routes, they could end up getting killed. It takes a lot more forces to win a location than it does to hold it. And so there just wasn't really a logical way to proceed in 43. They were still winning the U-boat war, taking out lots and lots of ships on their way, etc. So it just wasn't feasible to attack in 43. So in 44, they landed in June, good summer weather. The high tides, of course, were critical at that time of year. Did a great deception between Calais and Normandy, and the Germans thought they were going to land at Calais, and they landed at Normandy, built out the beachhead, and marched across Europe. By winter, and of course everybody there in the fight was continuously of mind from the landing and through the summer and into the fall that they were going to get to Berlin by Christmas, and that the war would be over. And so guys fought with that hope that the war would be over by Christmas time. As it ground on, it became more and more obvious it wasn't going to get done by Christmas. And so there was a lot of frustration with guys, but they fought on. They were sort of slowing down and hunkering down, waiting for additional supplies and troops and resting as you came up into December, past Thanksgiving and into December. And the meetings, where the various generals would meet with their troops and their staff to try and figure out what the next move forward were held pretty continuously. And on November 30th, Patton had a meeting with his staff, kind of in one of these low moments. Patton, was always attack, move forward, etc. But in that particular November 30th meeting, at the end of the meeting, his G2 officer, which was his intelligence officer, he would gather all the intelligence about what's going on with the Germans and other Allied forces and Axis forces, and what's their supply situation, what's it expected to continue to be, because of course you don't have enough supplies coming to you of the right type or fuel or whatever, you can get bogged down. So his G2 officer was one of the most critical people in the whole fight. Sort of an unassuming guy, and he spoke up near the end of this staff meeting and came out with the most bizarre thing. He said it was his belief, and it was other G2 officers in Europe's combined belief, that the Germans were getting ready to mount a winter offensive and to attack back and try to open up a new front to the north in the war. And that the objective of such a front would be to try to cut off the supplies out of Antwerp, Belgium, and then also to divide the British and American forces, the Allied forces. And that would cause military and political rifts between the combined forces of the British and the Americans and all the others that were tagged in.
And he explained with, the information that he had. He was kind of a low-key guy. He wasn't, a lot of people around at the time thought he was a polar opposite of Patton. And just in his demeanor, presentation, etc. And he explained the case. A lot of the people present thought it was just crazy because Germany was clearly collapsing within the types of equipment and personnel that everybody was seeing in the battle. And so then Patton said something that caused all these guys that thought they were going to get a little bit of relief to have to do a bunch of work. He said, I want you to prepare if it looks like the Germans are actually doing this. I want you to prepare an action plan to be able to turn 90 degrees and go north and intercept the Germans up in the Ardennes forest and that region if they try to do this. And there was a history for Germany. They had done an attack through this region into France at the beginning, back in 1940, of this whole European part of the war, and had blitzkrieged across this same region, so they knew it well to do this attack on France. Patton has his people. It's a big deal to try and change directions for a whole army. You've got to have fuel, food, communications. You need to have accurate maps. Where are you turning north at? Which roads work? What city's going to go through? What's the strength potentially of any Germans that are there, fortifications? And so it's a big deal. And these guys were going to have to do a whole heck of a lot of work, but nobody really believed what this G2 officer was saying could possibly be true. They just didn't see it. But they did what Patton wanted. Sure enough, as the weather turned predictably in that part of the world, because this is a mountainous region, as the weather turned to the winter weather, which could be pretty stark there, the Germans began their assault. They used the cover of cloud cover and fog to do what they did, and that meant that Allied aircraft couldn't do the surveillance, the photo reconnaissance. They couldn't even do any protective flights of any significance because the weather was just too unpredictable. And so even if they took off from southern bases and came up to try to assist, a lot of times the cloud cover was so heavy and dangerous, flying in the mountains, that they just couldn't do anything, had to turn back. So the Germans on the morning of December 16th began their Ardennes assault. The whole operation was called Watch on the Rhine, which was kind of based on a song that was popular in Germany at the time, and was really more about a defense than an attack. And so everybody that was on the Allied side was trying to assess exactly how big of an assault this was. They didn't think it could be that big because the Germans didn't have that much material, people other than this G2 officer that briefed Patton. And you have to understand, when he briefed Patton, other G2 officers and other units were sharing similar information, but none of the other generals believed that this was true, and they didn't take time trying to change directions or anticipate at all. Patton really was singular and alone in what he did in anticipating a German winter assault of some sort, something big. So on the 18th of December, the generals in that area all met at a location in eastern France. They shared what they knew. Apparently, the Germans had cut off the communication systems in that area for American forces and Allied forces. And so they didn't have good intel on exactly what the Germans had accomplished or were up to. and they didn't have, from the American side, they had broken Enigma by that point for all the German communications. The Germans apparently suspected that, or at least knew that if there was greater traffic, even if it wasn't decoded, it might be interpreted as something. So they had only, from the beginning for the preparations of this attack in the Watch on the Rhine, they had only done communications with their commanders by direct couriers using motorcycles, taking messages between the generals and the various locations, and had successfully pulled off a pretty big ruse. They actually had over 750,000 troops that they were able to commit, headed along this northern route to go split the British and American forces and to take the port of of Antwerp there in Belgium. So a huge force. Americans had a similar number in the region. And so you had 1.5 million men in some broad area, all racing to the fight, and the Germans were getting there first. When the staff meeting, the generals completed their meeting near the end of it, after everybody else said they couldn't do anything, to go north to help the 101st Airborne, which was in the city of Bastogne and was being encircled by German forces. They had about 14,000 guys that, when this whole thing started on December 16th, they were about 100 miles away from where the front was really at. And so they raced in trucks because they couldn't parachute in. The weather was so inclement. They did what they called tailgate jumps, and they raced in on trucks 100 miles, cold weather that doesn't keep you, can't keep the flaps on these army trucks warm. And, can't get them closed up enough to be warm in the back of these trucks. They went up through the cold. About 14,000 of them garrisoned in the city of Bastogne, which was on a major route to get to Antwerp from where the Germans were heavily located. There was another area, I forget the name of it now, Edenborn Ridge, I believe it was, that was also a key route that could get you there. And other troops got that area and blocked off a move of Panzer tanks for days. But in Bastogne, the troops were completely encircled over just a couple of days. And so no supplies could get in. So you got 14,000 guys stuck, and about 3,000 residents from the area, a total of 17,000 people stuck in this little spot. And the Germans were encircling them. At a certain point on the 21st of December, while Patton's people, he said he could be there in 2 days. Well, they had first engagement 19 hours after Patton said go. And the code word for Patton was nickel. When he walked out of the meeting with the generals, he had already prepared all of his people that we're going to pivot north probably and go into this assault, but we wait until we know exactly, because the Germans are pretty sneaky. They could have been trying to throw them off and get them to try to move. And while they were moving from one direction to another, they could get attacked in the south. And so that was still a great concern. But when Patton heard all of the intel, heard what the other generals were, where they were at, he sent back to his staff the code word nickel. And that meant move now, move, head north, and to execute his plan to get to this fight up in the Ardennes forest. And so as those troops moved, they had first contact with the southern side of this group, this massive amount of German personnel, 750,000 plus. They had first contact in about 19 and a half hours after that meeting, and when the first word came through to turn and go. They had to get fuel trucks there ahead, ammunition, the main battery of tanks and other stuff were following. Communication lines had to get in there. Just a huge thing. And it was the kind of cold where you have a mist, a fog, and that, it's moisture, so the temperature feels even colder, with cloud cover, no support from the air. And in Bastogne, the Germans successfully completely encircled the city by the 21st of December. And the German commander sent a letter to, he had guys, with a white flag. German troops went to the line where the two armies were meeting there in that area. And he sent a letter to the American commander at Bastogne. You're completely surrounded. In the interests of civility, human dignity, and especially because you famously, care for, the civilians and like that, I'm offering you the opportunity to surrender. It's your only real out. Otherwise, my tanks and artillery are positioned right now to annihilate you. So it's my recommendation that you surrender, and we'll take good care of you, blah, blah, blah. The American commander made the famous statement, nuts, in capitals, to the letter, and sent it back to the Germans to take back to the German commander. When they read it before they were going back, they said to the Americans that brought them the note, they says, "Oh, nuts, what's this nuts mean? We don't understand what it means." And so the 101st Airborne troops that were there at the line were kind enough to explain to them, "Oh, that means go to hell." And oh, okay. So they took the message back. And when word of this response from the encircled 101st Airborne reached out to other groups and units fighting to get to them, that actually had, it was very encouraging, their desire, their will to fight on against, impossible odds. They're vastly outnumbered. Estimates run 10 to 30 times. Their force were right there in the area right at that time, and totally encircled, no supplies getting through. And but that encouraged everybody else to race harder to get there, to get to these men. You got to save them. And because the Germans were wanting speed to get to Antwerp and to get these forces divided, and that was their whole claim. The problem is the best roads for this huge army to travel through were Bastogne and this ridge nearby, and Edenborn, I think it is what it was. And the resistance by those troops, a small percentage, think of that, 14,000 guys in Bastogne facing an army, of hundreds of thousands trying to overrun that location to get further back up. And they were fighting and slowing them down, holding the line while other forces were coming to the area and, trying to, get them some relief. And what was interesting was that in Bastogne, when the German commander offered the peace, no fighting, no firing, everybody paused for 2 hours. The German commander said he'd give him 2 hours to surrender. The guys there in the town could hear the distant rumble of guns. They were cut off on communications. A couple of airdrops had gotten in, giving them a little bit of information, some additional ammunition. Their medical unit had been overrun, so they didn't have any medical assistance available to them. They had kept them in the west, but the Germans had circled the town and captured them on the west side of town, and so they were not getting any medical. They, low on morphine. If you get a wound, trying to take the edge off, and pretty dire. Temperatures were running by that time about 10 below zero. So no heat, no rations, very little in the way of rations. They were at half rations, but that meant for a lot of guys no rations at all. And just that bitter cold. I used to ski instruct years ago, and I remember being out lots of times with excellent clothes and being in 10 to 20 below, and it would somehow get right through the gloves and everything. Man, it just bite at you every breath. It was just freezing. It's one thing to ski when it's a balmy 10, 15, 20 degrees. It's another thing to ski when it's 10 and 20 below. But
I've been there, bro. I've been there. We have Wildcat Mountain up on in New Hampshire here, and I think it's like one of the coldest places because it's up near Mount Washington, which is like the most severe weather. And dude, let me tell you this. Let me give you a chance to sip your coffee for a little bit because I think you might find this funny. And I think historically, back in the day before they got political, Saturday Night Live was funny, right? And every now and then they hit one, I think, out of the park. And I don't know, this was a few years ago. It's called Washington's Dream, right? And so it's obviously a parody and whatnot. So a couple of the soldiers are talking around the fire, and then in comes George Washington. And then he starts talking, and he's like, what he says? He says, we need strength for the fight ahead. We fight for a country of our own. A new nation where we choose our own laws. Hear, hear. We choose our own leaders. Hear, hear. Yes, sir. And choose our own systems of weights and measures. Weights and measures, sir? Yes. I dream of that one day that our proud nation will measure weights in pounds, and that 2,000 pounds shall be called a ton. He's like, and what will 1,000 pounds be called, sir? Nothing, because we will have no word for that. Seems like we should have a word for 1,000 pounds, sir, and yet we won't, because we're free men, and free men will measure liquids in liters and milliliters, but not all liquids, only soda, wine, and alcohol. Only those, sir? He's like, yes, because for milk and paint, we'll use gallons, pints, quarters, and pints, gallons, quarts, God willing. How many liters are in a gallon, sir? Nobody knows. And, sir, this new country, what plans are there for a color of men such as I? The black man asks, and he goes, distance will be measured in inches, feet, yards, and miles. And so he's just totally, ignoring the colored guy's questions. It's so funny. And he's like, so 12 inches to a foot, 12 feet to a yard? If it was only that simple. 3 feet to a yard. And how many yards to a mile? Nobody knows. Okay. Well, how many feet to a mile? 5,280, of course. It's a simple number that everybody will remember. So it's just like this parody about like hilariousness of how kind of messed up our thing is, but they did it in the light of like Washington, ready to strike over there. But you bring up good points about the weather of affecting things, and also it's almost like we're kind of, my estimation, like we're repeating history.
Well, I don't know if you see it. I've got the chickens that showed up to visit me here at the graveyard. I have a friend that's buried here, so I come up here sometimes. It's kind of fun.
They come home to roost.
Watched, these wild chickens. It's the craziest thing. If I don't pay attention to them, they come over and peck at me because they know once in a while I'll feed them a little something if I have a leftover biscuit or whatever. There's just the funniest thing. But anyway, I remember that Saturday Night Live skit, and I went out for. I had friends that were in a Saturday Night Live one time, and I was stayed out there at Exeter House in New York, and with some of the other cast, and then went to the live taping. It was pretty fun, and that was when things were a bit more wild and crazy and rollicking too. That was in, late '70s, very late in the '70s. Yeah, so that was a long time ago, but they did do some funny stuff at times, and they were political always, but there was a certain tone to the political that was, was still biting humor, and they went both ways. So that kind of worked. But no, but I was going to tell you here on this Bastogne thing. You just imagine you're completely outnumbered. You're not getting anything. It's ice cold. I mean, a bitter 10 below. Here's the other problem. These airborne guys, 101st Airborne, they, were a kind of a light infantry. So they didn't have a lot of heavy weapons. They were intended to go, race into an area, hold it, and everybody else gets to come in and fill it out to get things moving. And that's exactly what they did. They went into Bastogne and were able to provide relatively light resistance to the Germans, but it was resistance enough that the Germans couldn't get through that area and continue their march east. They had to do this fight. One problem was when the temperature got so cold and these guys were trying to fight there, they were kind of in a muddy area initially, and as the temperatures got colder and colder, if you're not firing your rifle all the time, it cools down. They'd get a little bit of moisture in them, a little bit of mud, and next thing you know, it's a non-working weapon. So there was a guy there by the name of Bill Turner. He was a gunsmith, lieutenant. Let's see, what was it? Oh no, he's a sergeant. He was Sergeant Bill Turner, gunsmith, 26 years old, and the guys were bringing all the guns, these M1 Garands, which were a pretty good gun, but they did not like to not be well lubricated. And so in that super ice cold, no heat, they had 340 non-working guns. And so they were not able to provide a full defense. They were running out of ammunition anyway. They brought these guns to him, and he began servicing them. They had, just like they got cut off from their medical supplies and medical unit, the tools that he would normally use to service these guns were all gone. So he's using his fingertips and stuff they could find to pull apart these rifles, break them down, clean them, and then grease them well, which keeps out the water and mud and like that, and reassemble them. And if you put too much grease on a gun, it has a different effect because now it doesn't want to work for other reasons. So it's an art, it's a science. And he's working in sub-zero temperatures while he's trying to service these guns for the guys so they can stay in the fight. They could hear in the quiet of that 2-hour break that there was distant guns, cannon going off. They could tell they were quite some ways away still on the 21st, estimated somewhere around 50 miles and or less. And of course, it's wind direction too that'll carry the sound of the guns at times, and could carry it tens and tens of miles. At Gettysburg, what was unique about the fight in Gettysburg was that from the first point of engagement, which occurred a day before most everybody believed they were going to actually start the fight, both armies were coming together, maybe 2 days before the fight would have otherwise happened. A couple of peripheral units started a fight, and because they crossed each other trying to find places to dig in and get ready for the main event. And when the fighting started, the guns shooting, the cannon, Union troops that were 20 miles away could hear the sound of the cannons firing and came running. And the I want to say Axis, in World War II, the Confederate troops, some of them were only a mile away, but because the wind was going in a direction that wasn't normal, it was unseasonal that year, was going past them towards the battle. It was pushing the sound away from them. So a mile away, Confederate troops that could have come and helped didn't even know there was a fight going on. And the guys in the fight weren't sending people back just to tell people we're in a fight. They're in a fight for their lives. So the wind favored the Union troops, and the speed with which the Union troops were able to get to the fight was a huge deciding factor in the ultimate win. In this case, the guys in Bastogne because of intermittent wind coming their direction. And remember, it was mostly dead calm. You had heavy fog, ground layer fog and clouds and like that. But every once in a while, they could hear what they could tell was reports coming back, the sound coming back of Allied troops moving their direction. And so that encouraged them to keep the fight going. And by the way, this happened, this quiet that allowed them to hear that happened right at the time of the winter solstice. The German general was actually of a mind to use some of that timing and dates and like that to his advantage. And many of the Germans believed that they got special power out of the occult and certain timing and events, and they believed it favored them to take Bastogne during the winter solstice, right at the height of it. And which, by the way, in their belief, lasts about 3 days. And so, in that time, and of course, by the way, Christmas, Christ wasn't born on Christmas, December 25th. That is the time when the end of the winter solstice is the sun starts returning from the low on the horizon, returning north. And within some of these occult religions, that's the Horus rising in this Horus, Osiris, Isis mystery that I've talked about many times. So here's this gunsmith working in the cold. It's so cold. You know how it is if you get a little water moisture on your skin and you're in these sub-zero situations, pieces of his fingertips, the skin on his fingers, was breaking off as he serviced these guns. And so he had to wrap cloth on his fingers to keep working. And normally it could take you, as you know, M1 Garand, to really do a super job on a gun like that, you can take easily an hour, 45 minutes if you're really good. This guy was outstanding, and he's racing because he knows a guy without a gun is not very much use in this kind of a fight. You know, what are you going to throw rocks at the Germans? You know, so he's racing to get them serviced and get their guns back out to him. And over the next 28 hours, when the Germans were getting ready to begin the attack back, he serviced 340 M1 Garands, never slept, never stopped, never anything. Fingers to the bone, literally, working on these rifles, never stopped. When the attacks began, every one of those 340 rifles in official reports worked perfectly in the fight and stayed serviced. After, by the way, Bastogne was relieved and they moved him back to a medical unit in the back, they had to remove 7 fingers because of frostbite and damage from having serviced those guns. He got a Bronze Star for that and returned to Kentucky, which is the home of the 101st and Airborne. And he returned there and had a gunsmith and gun shop the remainder of his life, working on guns with 3 fingers. He died in 2001 at 83 years old. And but you know, saved a lot of lives, stayed in the fight, did it when you know we think of all the tough things that happen in our lives, and at that critical moment, he had to know just how dire his situation was with what he was doing, literally working with his fingers to the bone, but knowing that any gun that he didn't get fixed was one less guy there able to defend that location. They were in danger of being overrun. They were on the verge of being overrun, running out of everything: food, fuel, ammunition, everything. And guys. They were taking heavy casualties. What happened in the course of this is the American troops were fighting, moving north, Patton's troops. Patton literally was running up and down his lines as these tanks and personnel carriers and fuel trucks and all the various supplies were moving north. He was running up and down the lines directing traffic, telling guys when to pull a vehicle out of a spot and keep it going or leave it and just keep moving. And he knew that time was so critical because the Germans were on a fast track to get to Antwerp, and they had to get through Bastogne. They were going to do everything they had to wipe these guys out. And he was equally racing his people, no sleep, moving north. It was about 100 miles to the point of first contact. It was about 150, depending on where guys were coming from in the area where Third Army and Fourth Army was operating, Patton's people. So they had to move 100 to 150 miles in extremely harsh weather, whiteout conditions, freezing. The Germans were attacking them all the way. They were anticipating some of this and moving, armor and personnel in to engage. That's what these reports back and forth of the cannon fire were that the guys in Bastogne heard. But as the cannon fire got closer and got clearer, that gave everybody, the spirit, the encouragement to just hold on. That's where people like Bill Turner, the gunsmith, he could hear that gunfire and knew that relief was so close if they could just hold on a little longer. And so as they got very close, the tanks, there was different groups of tanks and tank companies, armored companies, and they went by initials, A, B, C, D, E. So C Company was one of the tank divisions, and they had ground troops with them, and a couple dozen tanks still serviceable. The main fight was on the main roads into Bastogne, where you could move. The roads were better, wider. You could move more efficiently. So that's where the main groups of the armies were fighting. In a peripheral area. There was a town there. I forget the name of it. Cloist, Foyle, or whatever it was. And another town, Arnon or something like that. Arion. I can't remember off the top of my head. And I never do these shows with notes. I probably should, but it's hard to think. But in that area, which was kind of a side town suburb to the southwest of Bastogne, 2 columns of tanks from C Company were coming into that area, and they knew that this timing was just so critical. So they had developed a tactic where they would fight right through the middle of any German resistance. And this was part of Patton's thing. And if they're going to be under fire, they don't want to be exposed to it any longer than they had to. So they literally just put pedal to the metal and race through a town where they knew they had pillboxes and machine guns, things like that. Well, they got a tank. If they get a lucky score, they get a lucky score. If you're a Panzer or a counter tank, when you're moving fast, it's hard to hit you unless you're coming straight on, head on, and even then it can be difficult with terrain. And this town where they were coming into was on a hillside, not too different from what I'm on right now. When you crested that hill, you could actually see Bastogne. And so they were racing to get through this area to get to that ridge, because if they could get to the ridge, they could begin bombarding German positions. And if they could get their big guns that were towed up there in range, they could start artillery fire on the German positions and hold them and push them back and provide some relief for the guys in Bastogne. So on December 26th, mid-morning, as they fought through this area, as the commander of the tanks crews here said, he said, we highballed it. So jumping to stay over everything in the middle, they highballed it. You know, when guys would have to cross over barbed wire in some terrain that, you know, was to stop people and like that, they'd have to, you know, jump over it, and you want to make sure that you were high going over and nothing got stuck on the way over. So he called it highballing, and that's what they were doing. They were highballing it through this very dangerous area, and where they, you know, got heavy machine gun fire from pillboxes, and as they went through. And by the way, you know, one of the things, just a little detail, the different groups, how do you keep track of who's who if you saw it just from a distance? You know, the guys like to put tag lines or names on all of their equipment, personify it a bit. And so the lead tank in this group was called Cobra King. Well, of course, we'd think of King Cobra. It was Cobra King. And why would you start with the Cobra part? Because he was C Company. And so all of the first word in the name matched the company you're in, you know, A, B, C, D, whatever. So they were C Company, so they were Cobra King. And that was the first tank in the column racing through a very dangerous position, because that's where the guys, you know, get the first chance to take a shot at you. They were the rabbit. And guys that fly A6s know that. That's when they returns their radar on you, and you get them to come out of hiding, and then you're racing to take them out before they take you out. So they got through the first town, came over the ridge, and were now visible to the guys in Bastogne on December 26th, late morning into the early afternoon. Over the next couple of hours, they were able to rain 2,340 artillery rounds and tank rounds on German positions in the area. That was the first heavy resistance that the Germans had seen in this area since the fight started. And then C Company, two tank columns of C Company led by Cobra King, they raced down this along this ridge line and down through the last town coming into Bastogne, and joined up with the Americans in Bastogne. You know, these guys were waving and cheering them all the way in. Obviously, that was their relief when they first saw them on the hillside, but the battle continued for a few hours. When they first closed ranks and had first contact, they were able to begin getting additional supplies, arms, fresh troops that weren't very fresh. They've been fighting heavily for days also, but at least other guys into this fight and began supplies. They broke the German line in this siege of Bastogne, this complete encirclement. And then the guys that came in behind them moved from other locations in the fight. They started moving like ants to this area where the breakthrough had occurred, and filling out the resistance there at Bastogne, stopping completely the German advance. And now the Germans, the roles were beginning to be switched almost immediately, where they had, you know, this intention to divide the American and British and other Allied troops and cut off their supplies from Antwerp. Now that whole advance collapsed, and the Germans were trying to hold the line there at the least, but they were struggling. And here's the part about this whole thing that historians, I think, get completely wrong. in talking with some of the commanders for the Germans, they understood very clearly that there was huge risk that they would fail in what they were doing in getting to Antwerp. But their backup position was virtually unaccounted for by the historians. And that was, if they could delay the war, the conclusion of the war, which looked absolute at that point in time, because the Allied forces were being supplied ships, etc., out of England into Normandy and Belgium, and the submarine attacks on the shipping were becoming less effective because of innovation. But the Germans knew if they could slow down the point where they would be overrun and have to surrender by just 3 months, 6 months if you had a best case scenario, all the wonder weapons that we've heard about over all the decades since would have come together, and they kind of worked together. That innovations they had in submarines, radar, stealth, long-range missiles would all come online. The jets and the ability to work with them efficiently. Everything was starting to come together, and other technologies which most people don't even now understand, drones, etc., were just coming online. If they had 3 to 6 months, working in the caves, because they were in huge tunnels and mining caves, things like that, with a lot of these forced labor building things. If they could hold it for just a few months, delay the outcome of the war, they could force the Allies to work out a negotiated surrender. And the thing that a lot of people don't really even grasp even now, if they'd been able to hold the American British forces for that period of time while these wonder weapons came on, and they could strike a few key blows, including, by the way, they had nuclear. They believed they needed more than just one bomb or 2 or 3 bombs, but they had the delivery systems in mind with the rockets. With that perspective, Germany was hoping to delay. They delayed as it was. History finds about 6 weeks the outcome of the war, with the Allied troops forcing the surrender of Germany. But if they could have delayed it 3 to 6 months by busting through at Bastogne and the ridge a few miles away, and gotten to Antwerp and stopped off the supply lines there and divided the British and American forces, it would have had a political impact. It would have broken the spirit. It would have forced them to rethink everything. And Germany in that period could come on with some of the wonder weapons and force a negotiated surrender. And imagine what it would have looked like. Think about this. Right now we talk about a invasion of ideas, perspectives, communist, Marxist ideas, leadership in elected offices across the country. Look at Mandami there in New York, Karen Bass in L.A., the mayor of L.A., who went to just thought Fidel Castro was the most amazing, beautiful, important leader on the planet, right? And she's the mayor of LA. How'd she get there? Well, vote fraud, but that's another story. And imagine if we had a negotiated agreement not to go all the way into Berlin, to have some kind of a Germany under Hitler survive, and the people running Hitler by that point in time survive. In time, they'd have probably economically taken control of Europe. Germany's an amazing country based on the way that it works business-wise, machinery, the terrain favors it, or did classically at that time. Over time, they'd have won the rest of the battle, not with guns, but probably through the business agreements. They'd have normalized relations, and it's actually quite possible that you'd be, instead of having a society where we speak half Spanish and half English across America, you'd be speaking half German and half English. And as bizarre as that sounds, that's probably not too far off, because, by the way, when we went into World War II, in World War I, about 54% of the American population claimed heritage back to Germany. By World War II, it was about 50-50. And there was, all sorts of groups that had grown up in the time prior to the actual outbreak of war, promoting the Nazi Party and Hitler ideals, etc., even here in the United States. So if there had been some kind of a negotiated peace with Germany, and they had survived, and Hitler and the people around him had survived, there had been no Nuremberg trials, or whatever did occur would be very different than what we actually eventually saw. It'd be an entirely different world. They probably would have pursued their fight into Russia, and probably could have eventually won the fight in Russia had they been given a little bit of relief and their wonder weapons coming online. So the world, the whole political topography, the geopolitics of supply, oil, minerals, everything, business, the largest corporation in the world, IG Farben, with a vast number of Western groups, families, people involved in the IG Farben Corporation, they would have continued their takeover if they hadn't been dismantled for the most part. And by the way, they did survive the war, but they had about 3,000 sub-companies in IG Farben. If you do your research, it's pretty amazing. It would have been a whole different outcome. You got 14,000 guys in Bastogne who got there and held the ground till other guys could get in there. You got one guy working his fingers to the bone to just help their guys stay in the fight a few more hours. You got, on the American side, these tank columns. They lost about half of their personnel and half of their tanks, I think over half, just to get to that ridge overlooking Bastogne. And then fighting all the way down to make that first contact and open up a supply chain. And all the guys coming in behind them, the fight wasn't over there. Their fighting lasted for several days, widening that supply path and making it safer so that they could get all the needed supplies, troops, everything into Bastogne, where Cobra King, the tank, had gone in. And by the way, too, the other thing, the tank was largely forgotten to history for many, many, many years. Somebody who knew the tank saw it in the late 50s, I think, in some, location there in Germany, and says, no, that's it. That's Cobra King. You know what its history is? And they moved it to one of the military headquarters, and it bounced around a little bit. And only in the last, I think, 25 years was it moved back to the American Army Museum here in the States. Is on display there now, but it was, in the flurry of everything, nobody was commemorating the tank as the war continued on into Berlin. And when it was recognized, it was an iconic piece of history. You have a bunch of very iconic figures that stand out in this whole Battle of the Bulge. This huge, 100 miles long line of defense and attack. And the bulge is where the Germans pushed through primarily, creating a bulge in the Allies' lines, trying to break out to get to Antwerp. That's why they called it the Battle of the Bulge. The reason all that's important, both during the battle and since, certain figures stand out as being extremely iconic. We remember them, we venerate them, just like Bill Turner got a Bronze Star. He lost 7 fingers. I'd rather keep the fingers and forget the Bronze Star, but it is what it is. He, at the moment that he was needed, when there wasn't anybody else that could do quite what he could do, he didn't waver. He didn't whine or moan or cry. I bet he griped a bit here and there, but he just stayed focused because he didn't have much time to do any griping, to do the work he did as quickly and efficiently as he did. Every single one of those 340 rifles worked flawlessly in the fight holding Bastogne until the rest of the troops could arrive. He did his job with perfection. And I'm sure that a lot of tears happened just because he was in pain. And of course, the outcome for the rest of his life hinged on that few hours, 28 hours. The guys in the columns that fought through to get to the ridge overlooking Bastogne and then rained 2,340 rounds down on those German troops, and the supply lines to get those rounds to those tanks and artillery to rain that down on them. And they weren't the main thrust, they were a side thrust. They just happened to succeed when others were unable to get through. Having that tank, Cobra King, to remember and put in there as a museum piece, it's iconic because those that see it can take time to remember, to understand, to be told this history. It encourages others at a later time to do their part, to play their part in these great battles, good versus evil. With that in mind, right now, we have this amazing person, Tina Peters. When nobody else even knew fully there was a problem in 2,500 counties across the United States, only a couple of clerks went to the effort of making copies of their voting machine records from the 2020 election. Most just, didn't do anything. When Dominion and the Secretary of State of Colorado realized that there was data in those Dominion machines which could be dangerous if it was seen, looked at it, understood there was pressure to go in and audit the machines. They came up with a plan, and the plan was to do a trusted build on their vote machines in Colorado. By the way, Colorado is the U.S. headquarters site for Dominion vote systems.
Really?
And so, having something happen there in Colorado could be a problem. And so Tina, who was the county clerk in Mesa County, hey, Trump won Mesa County, so what are you worried about? But people came and talked to Tina at different times. She literally said she didn't think there was anything wrong with the vote in Mesa County, and that in fact they ran the gold standard of election machines and processes there in Mesa County. The only reason she ran for office when she did was because she'd done real estate stuff, she'd been a stewardess, she did business stuff. And when you'd go to get your driver's license renewed in that county there in Colorado, it could take you a full half day or more to go get your license. Some people had to drive up to 100 miles just to come to the one licensing office there where she was at and get their license. And then wait in long lines, 3-4 hours to get your license. It was just brutal. And people complained. It's like the weather. Everybody complains, but nobody does anything about it, right?
Exactly.
So Will Rogers said that. It might have been I think that back. I think it was Mark Twain said that everybody complains about the weather, but nobody does anything about it. Well, that isn't even true anymore. That's what Wright Patterson's all about. We do stuff about the weather every day.
And we get the
But
modification.
yeah, so that quote wouldn't work anymore. But so Tina runs for office, wins the county clerk's office on the auspice that she's going to get the driver's license thing sorted out. Everybody loved that idea. And she opened up a second office. Everybody said, you can't do it. It's going to be too expensive. You can't get personnel to work there. Well, she did it and did it at a fraction of what they had proposed it was going to cost to do. And took the wait to get your driver's license down to minutes from hours. And so she was pretty popular on that front. When people were approaching her about the vote, she just didn't know that area, that system, other than the bit of training she had. She didn't see anything wrong. But it didn't feel right when they were saying that they were going to do a trusted build on the vote machines, the Dominion machines. And people had warned her they're going to go in and change stuff. They're going to, if they'll say it was an accident, but they'll destroy or alter records or the way you get to the records on the 2020 vote. And they also commented that, it's not just the presidency. Look at the down ballot votes. There's a problem there. And she had another election that was happening for county council, and something happened there and it looked wrong. And so she had asked the Secretary of State and through the Colorado vote system for assistance in making a copy of the record inside the machine, just in case anything went wrong during this trusted build by Dominion that could damage or alter the information in the machines from the 2020 election, which, they had a responsibility, 22 months federal and 24 months state law that you had to preserve vote records. And so when she didn't get any assistance and was told even, don't do anything, her job as the county clerk and her legal responsibilities to protect that information didn't matter what the Secretary of State or anybody else said. She had a legal responsibility to do it. So she had made arrangements through contact, and somebody was sent out to assist her to, just like you back up your computer. You're not changing anything in the computer when you run a backup. You're just making a copy or a picture of everything at that moment in the computer. So if you have to, you could reload it and have exactly what was there, in case things went wrong after the fact. Common practice, back up your computer stuff, back up your information. And so that's what she did. In fact, the person that did that was using equipment that I supplied in part for that endeavor. And so she had a before and after. After Dominion came out and serviced her equipment, then they made another picture, and all of that information went out to other people to look at and see if there'd been a change before and after in the vote information in the computers. And in fact, we have guys in protective custody here in the United States now who actually participated in the flipping of the vote in 2020. They're out of Venezuela. It's 3 primary guys and a bunch of peripheral guys and their families. And the information out of Tina's Dominion machines is what was used as the comparative material to show how these guys could flip things before and after. It's kind of the Rosetta Stone from within the election system, proving that what they're saying is true, that they flipped the vote in 2020 in various ways, not just the presidential, but down the ballot also. And not just in America, by the way, but in 71 other countries besides the United States. Think about that. And they've been doing this for quite a while. They're out of Venezuela, but in reality, Venezuela has been being run by the Cubans for decades and decades and decades. and Maduro is just a puppet of Cuba, and as has been going on for a long time. Russia was really running Cuba for a long time, and now it's predominantly China. But those Cuban forces were, affecting elections all over the world and putting in people that promoted that communist Marxist ideal. By the way, the original machine type that was used in flipping these votes was branded as Smartmatic. And it's Smartmatic software and machines. In the U.S., things switched to Dominion, ES&S, other systems. Only one county in America still uses Smartmatic, but they don't call it that. It's LA County, and largest county in America. And, as far as population, there's bigger counties by land mass, but population of voters. And so in LA County, they have a special rule. The county clerk, picks the election system that they're going to use and implements it. Which because they provide the records, protect the records, county clerk's job, and they still use their own version, upgraded and super improved and better and everything else of Smartmatic, and it's the LA County vote machine system. Interesting that the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, is this literally frothing at the mouth proponent of all things Castro, Marxist Cuba, etc., and she gets the job of mayor. How does that happen? I can tell you right now, vote fraud, over and over and over, put her in that job and kept her in that job, and that's some of the stuff that will come out over time in the trials to come, and take it to the bank. You notice I'm not couching my words on this. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. I mean, because I'm going through the Rolodex of memory here, and it isn't what it used to be. But wasn't there a thing from 3 or 4 years ago, a guy out of L.A. I don't remember if it was Conic or if they were using ES&S, but he got in some hot water as well, if I'm not mistaken, out of California. Was Conic and some that were there within the voting. But I think you make a great point about Tina in that, basically the person that stepped up while other people probably could have, right? And I didn't know that there was more than her that actually did take.
There's one other county in Utah where the county clerk did make copies of the vote record in the machine.
And I mean, at the end of the day, they didn't even get her for, or arrest her for making a copy of that because that's not illegal, essentially. They got her on some key card bull crap, right? Like, use somebody else's key card to access a room, but it's like...
Well, the person that came in to make the copies, just for convenience, going from the room, used somebody else's ID with their permission, by the way. They've said elsewise, but that's been proven to be false, even in communications, text and like that. And even there, he was in the presence of Tina the entire time. He didn't even have to have a card, except it was easy to go back and forth through the door, having a card, go to the restroom, whatever. So it wasn't as intentionally covert as it was played out in the trial. But even then, it was a non-event. She didn't break the law. She had the authority to, control that space and to do what she did. They were reaching, but you had courts that were complicit in anything to do to try and make an example of Tina. And by the way, for those that may not remember, in the entire country, coming up on the 2024 election, Colorado decided their prosecutorial system, the AG, decided that because Trump had this wonky conviction, which he was appealing in New York, felony, that they could take him off the ballot. And, if he was taken off the ballot in Colorado, other states would follow. In fact, there was a dozen states that were ready to take President Trump off the ballot in the various states for the presidential election in 2024. As this was fought on an emergency basis in Colorado through the courts, because of course it affected the election and primaries and things like that. The idea was that if you couldn't put him on the ballot, you had to come up with somebody else as the candidate during the primary process and coming into the Republican convention, because he wouldn't be able to get on the ballot in numerous states, and force that at the convention they would elect somebody else to be the Republican nominee for office for the presidency. So Colorado, all the courts agreed Trump's off the ballot. It goes to the 10th Circuit, the federal court, and then very quickly gets all the way to the Supreme Court. At the Supreme Court, and you have to get grasp the magnitude of what happened there. Every single court, all of the people that mattered in Colorado, the people that worked together to get Tina convicted and put in prison, they all agreed that Trump could be taken off the ballot in Colorado, and other states were primed and ready to follow as it got to the Supreme Court to immediately take action to take Trump off the ballot. They were letting Colorado do the dirty work first. And the Supreme Court, on an emergency basis, because it did affect the ability to conduct the election for 2024, on an emergency basis, they reviewed and gave a ruling, and it was unanimous, 9-0, even with the most liberal members, including the Biden auto pen appointees of the court. They unanimously agreed 9-0. How many times have you heard of a Supreme Court ruling that's 9-0? It's almost virtually unheard of. Okay, they're 4-3 or 4-5, 7-2, 6-3. They're always divided, liberals and conservatives. This one time, it was a unanimous decision, completely upsetting all of the decisions in the Colorado courts. They were absolutely, completely, totally wrong. Even the most liberal justices couldn't find a way to back taking Trump off the ballot in Colorado, and the other states had to step down themselves also immediately. That battle all occurred in Colorado, for the whole country. Tina, the reason she's important is because in a very iconic way, she stood up, was counted, did what others didn't at a moment of decision. She didn't wait till after the machines had been touched and corrupted to take action. She acted before the fact, did her job, and made an image, didn't change anything in the machine. But because of that, and because she defied the Secretary of State, Jenny Griswold, and others' directions not to touch the machines, the fight was on. And over the next few years, of course, Tina spoke at Lindell's event up in the Dakotas and other locations. She was outspoken about the vote stuff. She was, being prosecuted for what, they came up with against her. They needed, in an iconic way, both sides had to promote or destroy Tina Peters. She was a pawn in somebody else's much larger game. And she did the travel, did the presentations, held the line, did the court stuff. My friend Patrick Byrne at one point stepped forward and gave $1 million to an attorney to defend Tina. And I think we may have to go back and revisit what happened there, because I don't think he did anything for that $1 million that amounts to anything. Very questionable, but it was the best. You know, you do the best you can with the information you have, and people present a certain way. There's a real big backstory on that one, and you know, I don't want to get off sidetrack, but there's real questions about how the system in Colorado worked. You know, Tina versus, you know, helping out a drug dealer. And so with all that in mind, they pursued Tina because they had to have this symbolic, iconic victory as a threat to all the other clerks around the country that were thinking about, you know, testing and challenging these updates to the Dominion machines and the way the votes were counted, cast, protected. And, you know, the common talk throughout all of the clerks around the country was, you don't want to get Tina'd, literally. You know, they'll come after you, so you better watch what you're doing. It served its purpose. They were using her, you know, like, you know, some scene out of, you know, any of these end time movies where they strap somebody to the grill of a truck and, you know, they're going to go bashing into stuff, you know, with these innocents on the bumper. You don't want to be that person. You don't want to get caught. You don't want to be displayed that way. And Mad Max type scenario. And so Tina has to go to this trial. She should never, ever have had to go to trial. Never. There was nothing there, should never have happened. Colorado, just like they did with Trump trying to take him off the ballot, they're a law unto themselves. And Tina was protecting the federal vote, by the way. That's why so many are so upset that Tina had to defend herself at all. She was protecting federal vote information. She shouldn't have been prosecuted at all in the state courts if there was some kind of a crime. Should have been protected from the federal side from any type of prosecution protecting the federal vote information. But, you know, this is stuff that's been argued ad, you know, infinitum. And so she gets prosecuted. The judge decides what information gets to get before the jury and how they have to interpret it. Does bizarre things on how he conducts his court and gets a conviction. And then at sentencing, just goes off the rails on the sentencing. You know, one of the things that he said is that because she was so outspoken, that he was going to punish her for being so outspoken. So part of the reason he put this super extreme 9-year sentence on her, which is nearly a death sentence, you know, for somebody that's 70 years old, in prison system. Women's prisons are much harder than men's prisons are, by the way. It's just the nature of the beast. Women age much faster in a women's prison than the men do in a men's prison. And so the judge had to go out of his way, you know, trying to make points with his, you know, constituency within the legal arena by being super harsh with Tina. He actually violated her Eighth Amendment rights, you know, against cruel and extreme punishments. You know, her being outspoken, that's a First Amendment right, free speech. And then to punish her more harshly, which he said right in the sentencing phase, very directly. That's why he was doing this extra extreme sentence, was to punish her for her outspokenness. That's a violation of the Eighth Amendment. By the way, in the habeas corpus, and there's a lot of people that fuss over this, the reason, you know, the habeas corpus was the show cause hearing, you know, for ever having had her on trial or having her in physical custody. That happened, you know, a couple of months ago. And in that show cause hearing, one of the people, a great friend, Tori Mars, had put in an amicus brief In that amicus brief, she pointed this out in detail. And the judge accepted the amicus brief and said, yeah, these are actually, you know, new issues that require some kind of decision. But then he also said, this might take a little longer because of that in coming to a decision. So, in other words, he now had the ammunition to slow down a decision in her habeas corpus. Some have argued that Tory shouldn't have filed that amicus because the judge could have more easily let Tina out on appeal if she hadn't filed that. Well, the reality is it's the problem for the judge is he's in a catch-22. If he rules against Tina and that amicus brief filed by Tory, then the case can immediately go to the Supreme Court, where there's all sorts of rulings that back what Tory said. On the other hand, if he does find in favor of that argument, not only would Tina be out of prison on some type of appeal and able to post bond and be free under bond, the whole case would have to be thrown out, and they'd have to start the whole process over again if they wanted to. And now we have a lot more information about what was going on in the machines, and it's unlikely that they would be able to win anything against Tina at this point in time. So that judge in the habeas corpus is in a catch-22 situation, politically and otherwise. And so she hasn't given out a ruling yet. And Tina, is still sitting there waiting for it. They're not rushing it. Tina's health, especially in the last several weeks, and this is why I came out, almost a month ago hard, we have to figure it out. Tina needs to be freed. She has medical issues with the cancer appearing to likely have returned. And at the very least, her health is declining by the day. Periodically all the inmates, and especially Tina, because they want to make it as hard on her as possible, have to do drug tests in the prison. Because, of course, drugs get smuggled in. By the way, some of the people in the prison are from Trinidad Ragua out of Venezuela. Tina's life's in danger in any of the women's prisons in Colorado. Remember the gangs that took over the apartment complexes in Colorado? Well, some of those members are in the prison system. You think Tina's safe? She's the one going against the vote fraud, and some of those gang members from Venezuela are in the same prisons. So some of those gang members from having to do these drug tests. The other day, she had to do a drug test, and she was so dehydrated that she couldn't pee in the cup. She couldn't even spit because she just couldn't get enough phlegm going. And you'll notice, and she's just plain cold all the time. She was threatened to be written up week and a half ago because they have to come out of the cells and go in general area and go to the medical window and get whatever pills you're supposed to get, etc. And so she tried to use a t-shirt to wrap around her neck because it's so cold. Look, when you get older, that's the other problem. Your skin gets thinner. It's just part of getting older, and some people more than others. Well, here she isn't feeling well. She's 70 years old, and like it or not, her skin's getting thinner. So you feel the cold much more intensely. That's why I see people as they get a little older, they want a sweater on, and everybody else is like, gosh, it's not cold at all. Well, I need a sweater. I want to be a little bit warmer. I want the dog on my lap to keep me warm, okay? By the way, Tina has a dog, Minka, who's being boarded by a friend of Tina's. And when Tina calls to talk to her friend and give her an update, pretty much every day, Minka's there listening. He'll bark and let her know that he's there, and she'll say something to him. And Minka's waiting for mom. they went through all these dramas together when Tina's son, Remington, died, Navy SEAL, Golden Knights parachute team. And a very bizarre situation, double chute failure, almost impossible. Something else going on there. And but Tina went out into the public area, and she had this T-shirt around her neck to just kind of keep herself warm. She's miserably cold, and they were going to write her up because you can't do that. You know, could conceal something or whatever. So you have this thin prison jumpsuit, the orange jumpsuit. You know, minimal clothing on. You're out in this cold areas, and just continuously freezing, and you don't feel good. So now what she's experiencing is a type of dehydration. You just can't get enough water in your system. It's very common with people in medical conditions where their system starts to shut down and they're not able to stay hydrated. I've had on numerous occasions people that were in my orbit where they get dehydrated and you have to get them to a medical facility, get saline into their system, rehydrate them, bypass the normal gastronomical side, swallowing it, and go right straight to the veins and rehydrate them. And oftentimes it's best to use a banana pack, which has other nutrients in it, folic acid and things to kind of revitalize the system. You can watch people, I've watched it set right there in the room, people who were literally on death's door, and they get saline, and it's like the breath of life, and you see the life come back in them. Tina's been having episodes of mental fogginess and having to, recatch herself. Another sign of dehydration. Can't spit, can't pee, can't eat, can't even get out of bed, extremely exhausted. I asked that some type of messaging get through to the correct people over the last couple of days, noting that she should be seen by somebody independent. Bring in the firefighters from the fire district where the prison's located and have one of their people do a quick evaluation, see if she needs to be rehydrated and rehydrate her. I don't even trust anybody in the prison system. Oh yeah, they're going to rehydrate her on Tuesday or Wednesday of this week. Right. When people are dehydrated, that's when you can have a stroke or even a heart attack. And she's been complaining about pain in her chest. And that's another thing people misunderstand. It's just dehydration. Get them rehydrated, and you can buy days, weeks, even in the most critical situations, by just keeping them hydrated. Tina needs intense medical attention immediately. That she's not getting there in the prison system. Looking at this as a something where they could come help her on a medical basis and go through all the inquiries, and taking weeks when she needs help in hours, minutes, not weeks. It's just not right. And but the people in the system, from the governor on down, are just fine if Tina dies in prison, for the crimes that she's committed. And Governor Polis made clear in a couple of different statements this last week, in spite of requests from Justice Department, President Trump's tweets, etc., that there's no way Tina's going anywhere. And when Trump tweeted on Friday or Thursday, I think it was, something, we knew then that negotiations to get Tina out of the Colorado facility to a federal facility had collapsed, and he was totally, lit up. President Trump, I know from personal knowledge, has been given multiple options that he could exercise to go get Tina. Her attorney, what made me think of Bastogne the other day, her attorney, Peter Tickton, who's her lead attorney now, there's a whole group of attorneys, fighting for Peter Tickton, who's Trump's very longtime friend. In fact, they've known each other so long, they were in military school together, 2 desks apart, when the announcement came over the intercom that President Kennedy had been shot. That's how long Peter Tickton and President Trump have known each other. But Peter has made a number of options known to the president, and other people have also, where he could act to get Tina out of the grip of Colorado. And other advisors around President Trump have come up with reasons why they didn't feel it was the appropriate move at this point in time. Peter Tickton on Bannon's show the other day, and this is what made me think of the Battle of Bastogne, said he wasn't against the 101st Army Airborne being flown into Colorado, go bust the prison doors down and take Tina out. Go get her. And that's what made me think of the 101st Airborne and one of their most famous battles ever. The Battle of the Bulge was the largest battle in all of World War II. Over 1.5 million men, 750,000 from each side or more, came to that location and fought it out, kind of a Gettysburg type scenario. It was the defining moment that finally broke the back of the German army, the Nazi army. Had they not succeeded, if the German army had been able to just delay for a period of time, the total outcome of the war would be completely different. Some negotiated, standoff peace, and Hitler and his crew remaining. I tie that to Tina's situation because in a similar iconic fashion, you can't lose this part of the battle. Somebody like Tina, an iconic figure in this vote fraud fight over 2020. The president himself has said that, we're not backing off of 2020. I've, got the song. Jen wrote it. 2020, it's not over yet.
I mean, how many times have we texted each other back and forth that jokingly?
Seriously. And by the way, when Trump was mentioning something with Tina the other day in one of his tweets, he mentioned the rigged 2020 election and that Tina needs to be out. She was protecting that voter information. So he's still on 2020. Even the staff around him, they try to, let's move on, Susie Wiles and all that crowd. And the president's coming right back to, no, you have to sort out 2020. You have to. And that's what even these people we have in protective custody here in the U.S. are testifying about in these grand juries that are going on right now, 2 of them. A third one, I think, just opened up. And by the way, for Colorado, you remember when it was put out by Justice Department that the investigation in Colorado was switching from inquiry to a criminal investigation. Remember that? Okay, yeah. So where's the grand jury on that right now? These people are going after Tina. Well, they may be facing a crisis of their own here shortly, but you can't, things like the gunsmith, the tank commander, all the people behind them, at these critical hinge points, big doors turn on tiny hinges. At these critical moments, those people that step up, do the impossible, do what they have to do, knowing that they're putting their own well-being on the line to make a critical stand, hold the line, as Tina did. Just like Patton said after the commander there in Bastogne said nuts to the German commander, and his guys interpreted that for the Germans. That means go to hell. Patton said, a guy like that has got to be saved. faster, faster, let's get there. Someone like Tina has to be saved. You cannot let them win a symbolic victory that those that come against evil, those that come against legal wrong as part of their job, like Tina did, cannot be allowed to be sacrificed in the larger battle. She's an iconic person. Her efforts, her actions are symbolic. They're iconic. And it gives some type of strengthening to the rest of the people present in the fight. There's, you know, you do something to save somebody like that, to bring them through in one piece. It gives hope, builds faith for everybody else in every position in this fight, in the you know, operations to clean up our election system and to win. And if she's allowed to be, you know, as far as I'm concerned, murdered, killed, destroyed in the process as a byproduct of the battle, I think that's a bad look for all of us, including the president. And so you have to do something extraordinary. It's appropriate. And he has been presented with options. He's got all sorts of advisors around him. And he is planning on doing something with an election emergency. And I believe that the original plan was to deal with Tina's situation in the context of that election emergency. The problem is the timing. She's in some type of collapse, cascading collapse of her system, I believe. And we don't have the luxury of time. If she was healthier at this point, it'd be different. But just like the gunsmith, he worked his fingers to the bone. And then between the freezing and gangrene setting in, the doctors had to look finger by finger and determine that they had to be removed, and only 3 of them were savable. If they hadn't gotten him to a medical unit as soon as they did, by the following day, he could have lost both arms and or even his life, because the gangrene getting into the rest of his system, it moves so fast. He was within hours of moving from just losing fingers to losing his life. Tina's in the same situation. There's clear indication something has turned within her system with the cough. It's been going on for weeks and weeks now. They wanted to say it was COVID, test her for COVID with a test that doesn't even work for COVID. Could never possibly show in anything. Give her meds that, do nothing for the cough or the cancer or whatever. Half-ass x-rays, they probably, cranked the dial up to kill her when they did the x-rays. I don't know. I hate to say that because the technician might have been a very good person, but there's something, I don't trust anybody in their system at this point in time. That's why they should have local firefighters come and check her out, independent look. They have legal right to come in and be used under contract in those prisons, and they should bring them in and let an independent take a look and see what her vitals are and what might be the proper thing forward right now, not even tomorrow.
What about
and
like advocacy, like people that are in prison, getting unfair treatment about something along?
Well, there is groups, and they have offered assistance and input from lots of different directions. And their input has been made part of communications and inquiries into the prison system. And by the way, let me just add this. So I'm not of a mind that Trump is exactly doing something wrong. In fact, his posts, his truth posts, he's got other people in his ear. There's a much bigger series of fights going on. Tina is a pawn in a much bigger game, and at some level, there's the political forces, judicial forces in Colorado are just aching for Trump to make certain moves because they can then respond in the courts in certain ways, and they've got multiple potential responses set up to villainize President Trump from the federal side, taking action in a state case. And I believe that when Trump does the national election emergency, that that establishes certain authorities where no court can interfere with them. But the timing on that declaration and the executive order that goes with it, which my team put that together, the one that we believe he's going to sign, 80+% of what he's going to sign, their 17-page document. But timing is everything. There's a certain moment that they want to do that, and they have their reasons. And so, President Trump isn't being passive in what he's tried to do related to Tina, but there is just like getting those troops through to get to Bastogne. They started on the 18th. Racing there, had first contact 19 hours later, just 19 hours later. They're 100 miles away and making first contact with German troops. But the fight still went on, for, a week before they got through with supplies to the men in Bastogne. And the villagers that lived there, and then began to build it out. And the fight actually went on till the middle of January, even the end of January in some areas. After, they got to Bastogne, the Germans continued to press forward, trying to get through, and at the very least prolong the war by dividing these forces. They hadn't given up. It was middle of the winter. It was a hell of a battle, and but it's like what's going to happen with the 2020 stuff as we get into the arrests. The media publicity related to the defenses and attorneys and everybody showing up and Gitmo and stuff in the Justice Department. There'll be all sorts of things going on. It's going to be the biggest thing that happens probably in most of this audience's lifetime, literally. And but this iconic symbolic figure, Tina, needs to be preserved through all of that. She's somebody that deserves to be rescued and saved, and do whatever you got to do. Let the chips fall where they may. Figure it out. Just get her. And we'll figure out the rest of it later. Let's just get her and we'll sort it out after the fact. And if you got to, crack some eggs to get it done, we can't unscramble them tough. We'll sort that out later. She shouldn't be a sacrifice on the altar of bureaucracy at this moment in time. Those people that don't get it, don't listen to him, Mr. President. I know he's praying and sweating bullets on behalf of Tina every minute. He's not sitting on his ass, dithering. But there's some coordinated, critical other components of the action that are in the consideration and the timing. And I would just advocate that in any battle, in any war, there's moments where you have to do as Patton did and make a hard turn. We know now that, they're trying to delay everything related to the operation of this administration, just like they did in the first term for President Trump. And people around him who are supposed to have certain jobs and roles are delaying internally. And by the way, let me just say something else. I've said it to this audience and numerous audiences for years and years and years and years. The real core of the fight here, the real core, is senior executive service. And this similar operations in this continuity in government, COGI system. We are in a battle where those people who are opposing Trump are doing so from their bunkers. And what's the symbology further with Colorado? That's where Cheyenne Mountain is located, our nuclear response that was never turned over to the Biden administration and by extension, those SES operators. Trump sealed up the mountain March 15th of 2020, and nobody with the auto pen, no matter what they signed or said, were listened to. Those guys are still locked up. People see stuff from a display standpoint around the mountain. Now, the stuff inside, those guys haven't given up at all. And this is a continuity in government operation, senior executive service, which was set up under Carter, as well as the Inspector General's offices, which was the turn in the way the country is run and who gets to run it. Carter, he's the one that had all this Council on Foreign Relations people on his in his administration and cabinet, et cetera, running the country. Carter was just a figurehead for this globalista crowd. And in fact, that was one of the things Reagan ran on. He wasn't going to be run by Council on Foreign Relations in his administration. That's why they hated him. But this SES operation here in America is the greatest threat of all. It's what ultimately everything Trump is doing is focused on, is their actions and activities. What they do is they take people in senior positions in various agencies, and for the purposes of maintaining continuity in government, they train them and then give them a income, including retirement, especially income within the SES system. So they buy them off. So if you're an FBI officer or a CIA officer or a Department of Energy officer, and you are asked to also be an SES officer, you get all this extra money, prestige, retirement, all sorts of things. Well, all of a sudden, you're not working for Department of Energy. You're not working for National Reconnaissance Office. That's your day job. You're really working for SES and this shadow government. Every time Cheney had a fake heart attack, he would laugh about the fact he was overrunning the shadow government, SES. They have their own bunker systems, supply systems, and everything else. In fact, I'll just tell your audience this. All that East Wing stuff, the fight over what's going on there and the delays and the changes and everything else above ground. In World War II and the aftermath, a tunnel system and bunker system was built there and built out further in the 50s and goes down quite some distance underneath the East Wing. That is cover for something much larger. And part of what they're doing is switching their communications systems so that from the White House, they don't have to run communications through any other systems, which could be SES monitored and controlled, in order to reach other facilities around the country, around the world. And there's aspects of this fight that are much bigger than most people in this audience have ever even considered. Tina is literally a pawn in a much larger game. This is chess. When we say 5D, imagine 5 chessboards, not side by side, but one on top of the other. And the top one and the bottom one have curtains around them. You can't see them. The only people that can see them are the 2 players in the game. And you're just an observer. Suddenly pieces show up from nowhere, seemingly, on the other boards. in this 3D game. Suddenly pieces disappear and you think they're gone forever, but they're just behind the curtain on a top or bottom board. And that's the kind of a fight that we're in right now. You don't fully see everything that's happening. I believe that before this is over, that in fact Tina is going to be freed somehow. I pray very, very, very shortly, and we can get her somewhere to get the medical attention she needs in recovery, and by prayer and God's grace, bring her back to health, keep her in the fight. When Tina, as a pawn, in chess, if you get all the way to the far side of the board with a pawn, they become a queen. They have the powers of a queen, which is the player with the most flexibility to move on the entire chessboard and to defend the king. If Tina makes it to the other side of the board, and she's very close, that's why they're fighting so hard, that she as an icon cannot be allowed to survive. They've got to have her dead in the prison system. If she makes it to the other side of the board, her power, her influence against the enemy becomes more powerful than any other player except another queen. And I believe that's the threat that Tina presents, that they can't let happen. They can't let their encirclement of our people over the 2020 election go unchallenged or be challenged. Tina would challenge that. That's that breakthrough moment. And that's where we have to fight harder to get Tina free right now and to provide the assistance, moral, mental support, whatever, for President Trump. I don't believe there's anybody else at this moment in time that's actually, the governor of Colorado has said no, and very decisively no. The court system doesn't want to do it. Even the habeas corpus, the judge there is gridlocked because the catch-22. If he agrees that Tina's civil rights were violated in the way she was sentenced and the way that the trial was held, and no ability to be free on bail while she fights through her appeal, like any drug dealer or manufacturer would get, she's worse than any of them, supposedly, in this judge's crooked mind. What she represents to the rest of the Patriot movement is so great of a threat that they cannot let her be freed, be healthy, survive. In fact, they want her dead to scare, like a scarecrow, anyone else trying to similarly protect the 2020 election, which is the main pivot point. Everything goes on the 2020 election. We'll never get a better documented situation. 2024 isn't comparable to 2020 and the consequences of that 2020 election with the Biden administration and foreign policy and everything else, the auto pen, the whole schmear. So it's all about Tina right now. And what I would ask everybody here today is to redouble their efforts tomorrow. You can send emails anytime, 24 hours a day, any day of the week. I'd be asking everybody to email the White House, President Trump. Figure it out, please. Get Tina free immediately. Well, she has a prayer, health-wise, to get through this and survive. She's an iconic person within the movement, and iconic person against the dark forces we're against. Also, she represents things going to hope and faith, has a different kind of a meaning over every other player in this big game. And go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I was just going to say it's huge, and something you kind of you were saying a minute or two ago rang a memory for me for the drops, and one of the posts said specifically, everything you are witnessing, past, present, and future, centrally revolves around the 2020.
Yep.
Important, and
and she's a central player. Nobody else is comparable. Even the other ones that did, the half dozen that did record those things, she's at the point in the fight. She's at the lead point in the fight. Symbolically, you need to break our opponent's backs. This is a backbreaker accomplishment to free Tina and save her whole out of this disaster. Shows where we're going, that we're on a winning team. Gives hope to everybody else in the fight, my opinion. So the visuals, the import are off the charts, and she's a pawn in this very large game. We cannot allow that slowness, bureaucracy prevail at this critical moment.
And I would say too, like you mentioned, it's not like President Trump isn't aware of this. He's also posted out, reposted last week something about her as well. And basically, I think we, like you said, if we redouble our efforts and make sure we're out there reposting this, because his social media team, they do notice things that people are posting.
Oh, yeah.
There. So, yeah, I think that would be huge as far as, getting out there, reposting him, tag Dan, and just get as loud as you possibly can over the next week or as long as it takes, and don't stop until she's out of that prison.
I would hope that tomorrow, Monday morning, the call-in line is open from 10 to 3 every day at the White House, Eastern. And so they actually take messages. There's volunteers that man the phones, and they take down a written message plus the message is recorded. And the president gets a synopsis of the messages of the day, oftentimes even during the course of those phone lines being open. I would hope that everybody here, both in email and in phone calls, even if you've called already, redouble their efforts and their concerns that Tina, as this iconic figure from the 2020 election and ever since, that every effort be made to get her free. And just like Peter Tickton noted the 101st and said, they should be the ones to break her out of prison. He wouldn't be against it in Bannon's show the other day. There's some symbolic tie to that siege moment in World War II and Tina's situation and the desperateness of this moment. We cannot let somebody like that be the victim in this situation. It has a flavor to it that we will not allow to occur. And conversely, when we do get her free and get her someplace where she can be nursed back to health, her presence through the rest of the fight will give others that are similarly, in tough situations, including, by the way, the remaining J6ers who still haven't gotten dealt with properly, and even the J6ers who've been damaged. They get a pardon, but they had such incredible damage in their personal finances, their home situation, etc. We need to take action to make them as close to whole as we can within their expenses that people need to pay for the damage that was done to the J6ers, again, related to the 2020 fraudulent election. But you start somehow there with the icons, the tank Cobra King, C Company, the efforts of one gunsmith to make sure the rest of his guys could even put up a fight. And Tina preserved that evidence. She made it possible with that Rosetta Stone of information for others to continue the fight other places she had no knowledge of at the time she took that action. There's so many other things I'd like to talk about that are going on, so many crucial things going on in the world I want to talk about. But if you don't win this part of the fight, even though we ultimately will get victory. There was plenty of know-it-all looking back over history in the Battle of Bulge. Well, the Germans never stood a chance. They didn't have enough fuel to get to Antwerp and do the whole fight. There was never a possibility they were going to break the American Allied lines. Maybe you're not dialing in the other parts of the equation correctly. They didn't even, a lot of these people are still astonished that the Germans created this massive force of over 750,000 men, where they thought that the army was almost completely defeated everywhere. Well, what they were seeing is, as abandoned lines, etc., was men reforming in other locations under other names and not communicating in the normal ways to do the surprise. If they forces against election reform can hold out just a little bit longer, they think that from 2026 on, they got this. If they can get to the 2026 election and somehow win on whatever basis the election in 2026, things like the Madami win in Florida indicate a trend that they think is in their favor. We could still lose this war. And we need iconic figures protected, their symbology protected in order to help keep the faith, keep the hope out through the ranks to complete what we've started here.
I'm putting it in the chat too. There's a few numbers, one for the switchboard. The one that I'm dropping is call it general feedback. So put this on the chat. Build chat. Live all the definitely get out there, guys. Here's your mission for today and tomorrow. The rest of the week. Till Tina's gone every day. If at least one of us do one message a day, you know, a couple probably 50. But if all get in there and leave just one a day each, that'll be at least 1,000 messages a day we can send here once. I agree fully. She needs to get out of there. And some people just aren't understanding in the chat. This is a state charge that Tina is under, and unfortunately, if she was under a federal charge, President Trump could basically just do it with a signature and pardon her very easily. But it's very similar to, like, say, D.C. with the federal National Guard troops. Like, he can't just send in troops to D.C. because it's not his area. Essentially, he has to get permission. The Capitol Police and Nancy Pelosi, blah blah blah. So similarly, when he goes into states, he can't just force in and do whatever he wants into different states. That's why we're called the United States of America. So yep. It is a tough situation, and I think some people are while I understand she needs to be out of there, like some people are saying, oh, you need to go get some marshals and just go storm the prison. And I'm like, maybe at some point they need to, but like it's going to come to a certain point, Juan, like you said, if they don't muster up some cojones and do something strong here, it could definitely leak for sure, but definitely need to do the right thing for somebody who did for our country. The whole idea that they put her in jail is disgusting, absolutely disgusting. But I think if we get louder, and especially people in Colorado, if you guys live there as well, reach out to your representative. How much that would help if they wipe their butt with the message, but do what you can, get her out of there. Save the people that helped or tried to save our country.
Well, let me just add this. There is stuff that President Trump has been advised that he can do, but it's not without consequences, including Colorado going into the liberal court system and winning an argument and getting Tina back because of certain stuff, or she gets to do some quick testimony somewhere in a grand jury, and then Colorado wins with a corrupt, judicial system, and they have to give Tina back. How much more damaging would that be to Tina? Although, at least we'd maybe get some medical stuff taken care of and allow other stuff to move forward. At the end of the day, Trump would have to stand some stuff on its ear, and there would be other ramifications in a zone where he's not getting good support even within people he's put in office. And by the way, Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche over at Justice Department director and deputy director, there's a reason why Trump had to pick Pam Bondi. You have to get those types of appointees past the Senate for the confirmation. And so you get the best that you can. You wouldn't have ever gotten, say, a Sidney Powell or somebody like that past the Senate for confirmation. They just weren't going to let it happen. So in order to get things moving, Trump had to pick appointees, both in his first term and in this term, that he could get past the Senate and get them on the job working, Cash and others. Now, I've said all the way along, a number of these appointees are temporary, and they'll get to a certain point in time, and then Trump will most likely pull them and go other places. And even behind the scenes, Trump has made it known that we shouldn't be looking for the needed relief at Justice Department. It's going to come from elsewhere. Well, where else could it come from? It's because of a action done as commander-in-chief, a national election emergency, an executive order on how we're going to run the 2026 election. And within the context of that, then him doing other actions, including things like Tina, where no judge can do anything to stop him because it's a national emergency that he declares and he takes control. They don't like the idea of kings. Well, it's the point that he declares a national election emergency as commander-in-chief. He has all sorts of different rights, and no judge is going to flip it. In fact, any judge that opposes him can themselves be taken into custody and imprisoned as an insurrectionist. So I think there's stuff coming. We just need to press forward at this critical moment. And, exhaustion, I'm so tired, I don't care anymore, nothing's getting done right, blah, blah, blah. You're all in C company. You're at the periphery of the fight. The main fights happen in other places. You don't back off. You don't rest. You don't stop for anything, because that one day's difference from sunset to sunrise overnight would have been the difference between a great hero, an incredible person like gunsmith Bill Turner, surviving or not surviving. We got to get in there and get these people. They deserve it. Nuts to all of them. Go get her. Go get Tina. Get her now, please, Mr. President. Figure it out. Get it done.
Hey, did you want to take us out of here in a prayer, maybe for, especially?
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, I'd love to. Father God, I thank you for each person here, this beautiful audience that Space Shot has, this special group of people, one of my favorite audiences in this whole country. I ask you that you would give them the peace of your presence and the power, conviction internally to press through for those who are in a full defensive situation, specifically Tina right now, and give each one of them an idea and understanding and action that they can do, which will have some meaningful part in the fight at this critical moment. We pray specifically for Tina that you would buoy her up, that you would give her inner strength, that you would bring medical attention to her even right now, this minute, to rehydrate her and to force those who have power and control over her physical being and her location, that they would be forced to give her correct, proper medical treatment this moment, and that you would help her and refresh her to stay in the fight while we pool our resources, refocus our efforts in order to get her out of this desperate situation. And that once free, that you would bring her back to full and complete health, and that you would allow her to enjoy the victories they had, to savor them personally, and us to savor them with her, not as a memory or someone who is no longer able to fight and is at the side, but in the fight, present, doing her job, fulfilling her role, this iconic figure for all of us, that we also would be similarly strong and decisive at critical moments to do what needs to be done, not just to take back America from the frauds, those who counterfeit votes like others have counterfeited money because it's more valuable, that you would stop our enemies in their tracks, that you would reveal things about our enemy that embarrass them and even bring them to legal justice for their actions and their collusions and their treasonous, traitorous actions. We pray that as you do that with us here in America, and as our leaders are able to go through and bring justice and just weights and measures to the election system here in America, that those assembled here and the leaders, including people like Tina, would also be able to speak and assist people around the world, those other 71 countries who have fraudulent leadership in place through election fraud, that we would be, as a people, as a nation, able to go help our brothers and sisters around the world, not to be the next tyrant or dictator lording our power over them, but would be our brothers and sisters, brother and sister, that we would be able to close ranks with them and help them to have honest free elections also, as their place in this world, the beautiful thing that you gave us individually as humans within these lives that we have, that we might serve you more fully, that having freedom within our elections and leaders who truly represent us will be reflected in our religious life also, to freely worship you, serve you, and do good, to go out and help all of those afflicted around the world, to bring beauty into the world where there's ashes, where there's pain, and have a world according to your will. We ask for this assistance, for more than adequate provision, protection, and health in the days ahead for everybody involved, and clarity of mind and focus and purpose for President Trump as he makes his next moves. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate you bouncing on here with us in
Yep.
beautiful Hawaii weather as I'm up here in the Northeast. Easter off. But I appreciate you jumping on, brother.
Well, I'll
Definitely
be
gotta do
there
this
in the
again.
next couple of days. I got to come back to DC, but so it's a short lived thing for me. And by the way, just a quick aside, I didn't want to distract everything else I wanted to share with about Tina, but the metal stuff, everybody knows I'm pretty hard on the silver. It's moving decisively. And, when I first talked with your listeners several years ago about this, it was moving out of the churning, which I had said was going to be in place all the way back in 2010, 11, 12. And was in fact the case. When it turned and started its march up, we're far from through that. And stuff that looks, expensive right now is going to look dirt cheap before this is over. I have some silver over at gumroad.com, allpatriots.gumroad.com, I think is how it's spelled. And I have, those prices I'm holding for today. I'll see what silver does tomorrow, but I had to reorder silver, and it was at a much higher price than some of what I have left here was at. So I'm kind of keeping the prices there till this current batch is gone, which I expect to probably sometime, in the next few hours or day. And because
$58.
yeah. Well, I mean, when I was talking about this even a couple of weeks ago. It surged up there above 56. I've been saying, back when it was 42, 43, 45, I says, well, the next choke point after silver at 40 is 70, not 50 or 60, it's 70. And that's where there's kind of a reshuffling again. It's going to go much higher than that. But, I've got, the silver that we have, Jen and I have on our sites, she has, like just single coins over at thejennifermac.com. And I've got the multiple coin stuff over at my site. But the thing about it is, those coins that we have are proof quality. So they're polished in a different way before they're even struck. And so they're comparable, not with circulated or uncirculated, but with proof quality coins. So they don't just follow the price of silver; they're a little bit higher, but that's the same as what the Treasury has in its proof quality eagles and comparable in price, pretty much exactly. So anyway, that's I've had some people question, why are we more expensive than just the spot price of silver? First off, coins, by the way, run at a higher number because it's if you have U.S. coin, it's a known purity and certified quantity of silver, and so and then they're not 100% 999 because they have other metals in there to do it. So there's certain pricing things that go in there that brings the price higher than just the spot price, and then the proof stuff is a higher thing still. So I think anybody that's buying our silvers, even from the history of the last 3 years, has done fantastic. So and they're going to do even more fantastic out in the future. But if you're just trying to invest a wad of cash in, you want the least risk possible, everything else, just bag silver, not collector stuff, just the cheapest price you can get on U.S. silver coin, pre-64 silver coin, dimes, quarters, $50, dollars, whatever. Just take it for the weight, and remember that it's not pure; it's a little bit less. So there's stuff that goes in there, but it's constitutional money. It's a currency, and you'll be there ahead of the rest of the game. Like I say, I think our stuff is a great deal, but I'm just saying get in there somewhere. And then I know, by the way, a lot of people in the audience here, some would argue the majority can't afford to buy anything right now, silver or whatever. The only other thing I'd tell you is this: at a certain point in the game, as we switch over from fiat paper currency, which has no backing at all, at the Federal Reserve, to Treasury certificates, which is where we're going, Trump's going to do honest elections and honest money. They're the most important things ahead that he has to have to help save the country. And you do that, you take out people like the ones in SES and all the other mischief around the world. But when you are getting to gold and silver coins or whatever with real value, you're actually going where we're all going in the end anyway. You're just getting there first. So if you're concerned about the future but don't have a way of getting gold or silver or something like that, your services, things that you can do, will generate money. And a lot of people that have silver have accumulated now are still going to need assistance, help, goods, whatever that you may have. Get in a position to provide that, and the silver and gold will come to you. In Germany, in the collapse of Germany in World War I through 1933, that 15, 16 years after the end of the First World War, people were getting paid in Deutschmarks. When World War I ended, $1 and a Deutschmark traded on par, even. They would each buy exactly the same amount of goods. By 1933, when the Deutschmark fully collapsed, a wheelbarrow with billions of Deutschmarks wasn't worth a wheelbarrow load, wasn't worth the value of the wheelbarrow. The money in it wasn't worth the value of the wheelbarrow. while the gold and silver continue to hold value. And in things that are coming to be ahead of where it's going, denominating your wealth in metal for the time being, it's a seat in this musical chairs. There's going to be a point you're going to want to reinvest. There is some investments that might work right now, but if you don't have perfect investment advice, you want to sleep at night, you don't want to take a chance, this is the time to switch from fiat of any type, including cryptos, into the tangibles, gold and silver. So anyway, there you go.
I appreciate it, brother. And I can't believe silver's that crazy. And remember, me and Juan actually, we've been doing videos together at least back in 2018, 19, and silver was $17 and gold was $1,700. Now you're in the 4,000 or something for gold and 58 for silver. So yeah, and it's gonna keep going up. So
well, and the proportion gold to silver is going to continue to move closer on the pricing. Silver was radically suppressed in value, and that's where these breakouts are coming. So expect silver to do better as a percentage than gold all the way through this. So yeah.
Oh yeah, brother. We'll get back to you, woman, and go enjoy the rest of that Hawaii weather. And give me a call, and we'll get you on anytime. I got all sorts of time, so whenever you need to get on, we'll get you right on. And everybody, again, call the number. I'll put it up on the chat again. So everybody call into the White House once at least. Well, we'll have at least 1,000 messages waiting for them.
Oh, at least, please. I hope 100,000. Yeah.
Thank you so much, brother, for coming.
Hey, bro.
On. I appreciate you. Have a good ride on that mountain.
Right. Yes. All right.
Have a good rest of your Sunday, my man. Peace out. Guys, that was Juanito07. Guys, remember, thinking about volume doing this crappy thing. I'm telling you guys, my laptop is like, maybe I'm just far away from the, here we go. Better. I'm kind of yelling, and it's just barely hitting the yellow, not red line. Anyway, let me just go over and thank a few folks over here, out of here, and actually hope you guys don't mind. Crypto commercial quick, and then of course be back tomorrow evening with Mac for Hold the Line at 7. All right, guys, and just really quickly here, let's be clear. Cryptocurrency is no longer emerging. It's here, and this latest move cements that reality in the biggest way yet. Trump Media just inked a massive $6.4 billion deal with Crypto.com, the world's top crypto platform. They're teaming up to scoop up $6.4 billion in CRO, the powerhouse token that fuels fast, low-fee DeFi, staking rewards, and real-world perks like cashback on your spends, to launch America's first CRO treasury. When it's done, this new company will be the biggest CRO holder out there. Want in on the action? Head over to Crypto.com today and grab some CRO. Let's make crypto great again. Heading over to the D Lives and Cosmic Dildo. Patriot Chick and Debbie Roush, the top and fill bucket. Let's rule. On eFoxhole.app or pilled.net website, same. I already thanked, but I'll thank again Matrix Codebreaker for 107 time. Let's go. Much love, Space. Love back at you, brother. Q shook me all night long with the can. Where we go one, we go all. God bless. Thank you for that. Wild Blanc with the cookie says it's snowing here and night. Over dramatic earlier because I think it's like 40 here today, but it was 17 for the low and 13 days ago. But yeah, it is a balmy 40 today. Toasty. And guys, just really quick in the chat, if you remember, because this has kind of been bugging me lately, that conversation that I told you I had with my father, when it's really cold early and it's not even winter yet, does that usually mean it's going to be a really cold winter? but by your memories, guys. This is all by your memories because I don't think we have any statistical things to back this up. But by your memories, is a very cold pre-winter going to be a cold winter, or it's going to make it a mild winter? That's there. That one. Sean Joe with the cookie. Thank you, Sean Joe. Punk Q, Rocker 4Q with 217 gold pills. I appreciate that. And 2 more cookies from on the way out of here, ending at 1017 gold pills, whereas last show we ended at 17. You guys did the 17. I love it. Releasing such rewards that are coming at you guys. As I mentioned, I will be back with Mac and Lisa. Fine, Jesus, where we're at. 7, 5. Yep. So. Tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Golden Line. There, if you guys have time, do me a favor on all the platforms that you guys are on. Please click thumbs up on the way out of here. And thank you to the mods as usual. You guys rock, helping myself and many others out there over the years. So much appreciate help. At the end of every show, I do appreciate each last one of you wonderful world patriots out there for. Till that next one, thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Peace.
Hello, guys. Something special is happening in here. That's right. It's brackets and jackets. Bringing it back for brackets and jackets. Special Epstein Island edition. That's right, folks. Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein, the man with the island, which is suspiciously close to Haiti. That's right. You see, this man, Jeffrey Epstein, is funding lots of people. He's funding lots of people on the street to make sure his shit doesn't get out. That's right. They want the record sealed. And they're paying a lot of people. Epstein's paying a lot of people. Oh boy. For one, he's got a whole Mossad media matrix in America. And I would bet you anything that Alex Jones is one of them. Prove me wrong. That's right, Cappy's in the portal. Cappy's in the portal. Cappy's in the building with songs about Epstein. It's Breakfast Jacket's Epstein edition. Guys, I had some epiphanies today. I had some real big epiphanies about some guys. A big network of guys and spies and lies and liars. All right, think about this for a minute, okay? The guy in Portland, the scientist that just got busted for producing CP, that guy is 1 degree of separation away from Epstein. Epstein, the investor that lives in West Palm Beach, Florida. I know a guy who lives in West Palm Beach, Florida as well. Investor as well. Also involved as well. And all is not well with these guys. The Florida boys, the Glow boys, the Scott Israels of the world. You see, Epstein is Hillary Clinton. And Epstein is Haiti. And Epstein is a big network of media assets. By the way, did you know that Steve Bannon was going to that guy for money? Also, Epstein is Epstein Oprah. Epstein is Chris Tucker. You remember him. Epstein is also Kevin Spacey. Epstein is also Prince Andrew. Epstein is also... Who else is Epstein? Who else is Epstein? Tell me. You guys know? Who else is Epstein? Is Epstein Big Pharma? Is Epstein Bryan Singer? Is Epstein Naomi Campbell? Yep, all of the above. All of the above. Who is Epstein? Epstein is the keystone of a whole motherfucking matrix. And once you pull it out, it all falls down. Dersh was there too. That's right, we're dropping red pills every day. Dropping red pills in the best kind of way. This is brackets and jackets for the denizens of islands.